Welcome back to another edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary, and part-time co-host, Alec Krauthamel. A lot of news to get at you guys today. We have one piece of the puzzle resolved in terms of the Rutgers football coaching search. Rutgers has found a co-defensive coordinator who has New Jersey ties that we'll get into. Give you his full background and how he became a Scarlet Knights coach on the staff. Talk a little bit about the Rutgers basketball loss from this weekend and how that affects the rest of the season. Talk about a spring game date announcement, and a top wrestling recruit in the country is set to make his decision. We'll tell you where Rutgers stands there. But first, before we get into any of that, this podcast is once again presented to you by by Knight and Day Apparel. Hey, Rutgers fans, get ready to slam dunk your style this season with Knight and Day Apparel. Cheer on your Scarlet Knights basketball team with our exclusive Rutgers gear. From trend-setting designs to lifestyle garments, we've got you covered with everything you need to support your team in comfort and flair. Stand out in the crowd and show your passion for Rutgers basketball with designs that celebrate every dribble, dunk, and victory. Use our promo code Rutgers Rivals to get 10% off your purchase. Don't wait. Head to Knight and Day Apparel today and gear up for game day. Go Knights. We are also presented to you today by BetOnline. BetOnline is bringing the biggest betting weekend of the year here to you this weekend, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game betting. BetOnline is your ultimate guide to game day. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything you need to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make the game the day action. They got to update this copy. Count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. I promise you there are some errors in that copy that I'll fix just so it's readable. Let's start off the top here. Rutgers has found one of its replacement coaches. Even though we only lost one coach this offseason, defensive coordinator Joe Harris-Simiak, this might be not the last move that we see this offseason. Rutgers has hired Zach Sparber to be its co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. He is a New Jersey native. He went to Bergen Catholic High School. He also played football at Brown, and he spent last season at James Madison as their linebackers coach. This one was not a coach we had on the board, Rich, but somebody who makes sense in hindsight, given his connections to New Jersey. Talk about how this came together and what Rutgers is getting in Coach Sparber.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting one. Coach Sparber came from Bergen Catholic back in the day, played at Bergen Catholic, was a captain under Nunzio Campanelli, and then went to Brown University, where he was a captain at Brown too. Senior year at Brown, I believe he tore, I think it was his ACL, and just wasn't able to really go anywhere with it, with football-wise. I think he was an all-Ivy League guy too at one point. Really talented football player growing up, and then he just went right into coaching. Went to Stonehill, then went back to Bergen Catholic to coach offensive line. Brian Felter, notably Scarlet Knight starting offensive lineman, where he was the O-line coach for them. I think all 5 offensive linemen for Bergen Catholic the year he was there in 2017 ended up playing college ball, which is huge. And then he went to Virginia Tech, assistant D-line coach for a couple of years, Duke, where he was an analyst/assistant linebackers coach, and then most recently James Madison as their linebackers coach. Now, he's only had 1 year of legitimate on-field coaching experience. I know it's called not really on-field anymore because there's no limit to how many coaches you can have, but he was the main position coach for the linebackers at James Madison. We know James Madison had a pretty good year. We know we've mentioned Lyle Hemphill, the DC there, a million times over and over. Bob Chesney's a great coach, so on and so on. But one of the better defenses in not just the Sun Belt, but in all G5 this season. He's a guy that's been very well known around recruiting circles as a guy that just basically knows who's who, whether it comes to coaches, handlers, I guess you can call them still. Have we still call them that? I don't know. Uncles that, estranged uncles that all of a sudden come into play when you're a high school junior and you're a 4-star. But yeah, he knows who's who in terms of the recruiting scene. So that's really big for Rutgers because you want your assistant coaches to have some kind of recruiting chops. On top of it, I've talked to people he's coached with before, and everyone goes to say that he's very detail oriented. He will get it done. He'll make sure that everything is just ready to go when it comes to game day and stuff like that. But just seems like a decent hire as long as he's not the play caller. I don't trust someone that hasn't called plays, let alone someone that hasn't really been at the Power Five level as a full time assistant or as even a only one year of being a college football assistant coach.
Yeah, this is I don't want to make it sound like I'm dissing the hire because this is probably the first in a couple moves, a couple maneuvers on the coaching staff because if he's already listed as a co-DC, and so if you're listed as a co-DC, that inherently means there's somebody else who's going to be DC as well. But for 2 months to have passed, and this is the hire that gets made, if this is the hire and somebody else gets up to co-DC on the staff, and then it's basically like Schiano calling plays, this is a borderline disaster because Schiano has a track record of getting guys to move up the coaching ladder. If you look at Heatherman recently, goes from linebackers coach to DC. Now he's one of the highest paid assistants in college football. You look at PJ Fleck in the past. You look at Joe Harris-Simiak. Like this is especially on the defensive side of the ball, like Schiano can help you progress your career. Additionally, Joe Harris-Simiak was one of the top 25 paid top 25 paid assistant coaches in all of college football. He was set to make $1.5 million in 2026. You're telling me the combination of advancement in career and money can't get you some like really high level defensive coordinator? That to me is the concern here. Could there be some other big, mega brain move that's happening in the background? Maybe, but if I had to guess, there's probably going to be a guy who gets elevated to co-DC, and then Schiano ends up being the de facto play caller, and then it's kind of like, okay, now you're stretched. Last year you stretched Harris-Simiak too thin. Now you're stretching yourself too thin as head coach. This is just me guessing here, but to take 2 months and this is the coaching hire you make, it's underwhelming is an understatement for this, in my opinion. And that's not to say that he can't be a good coach. Like that is totally separate from this argument here, is that he could be an awesome coach. He could be a guy who's DC in waiting, and he could just be a total stud all around. But the optics of this don't look great at the moment. Alec, what is your take on this assistant coach hire, co-DC in Zach Sparber?
Yeah, it kind of comes out of nowhere. Definitely not on our not on our radars. Mostly because on our radars we kind of been looking at guys who had that play calling experience on the defensive side, and this is someone who doesn't have that. And like you said, could be a complete stud, but it is definitely an interesting one. Having the local connections is definitely good. Having that New Jersey ties, playing for Bergen Catholic, coaching for Bergen Catholic definitely helps. I'm very interested to see how it goes in terms of the play calling, things like that. They did need a linebackers coach because Harris-Simiak was also the linebackers coach, and like you said, Mike kind of stretched him too thin last year. But then I guess I believe they're full for on-field coaches, but that rule's a little murky, I think. So who knows what the heck they could do next? But I guess if they promote from within, probably I guess the easy option would be to promote Mark Orphy to the other co-DC, because it feels like he's been pursued by anyone and everyone. And over the last few years, his stock has continued to go up as a recruiter and as a position coach as well. And I don't know how inspiring that would be, especially because, looking at not just the fact that he only has 1 year of being a full-time position coach, he has mostly his coaching career isn't that long anyways, and now he has worked in the Power Five as as assistants. He worked under Bud Foster at Virginia Tech. That's definitely a name that college football fans across the country know. But I don't know if this is the veteran. Obviously, he's not someone who's a veteran in the coaching ranks, but I'm very interested to see how this obviously pans out. The James Madison defense last year was very good. As we talked about a bunch of times when we were discussing Lyle Hemphill, and this guy never really came up in those discussions. So, it's a very fascinating one. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I'm very curious to see where they go next for the other option of co-DC. See who they pair him up with, whether it's someone who's a defensive backs guy or just a experienced play caller or something like that.
I feel like there's a couple things too. Like you don't have to hire another co-DC first off. Like you could just straight up hire a DC and someone could have co-DC title, and it's like here's an excuse to just give you another $100,000. I can pluck you away from James Madison because James Madison was considering him as one of their top targets for their DC role that's now open. So that's one way to lure him away. Also, if my thinking is if it was going to be Orphe, you would have gave him a chance to call plays against Kansas State. And you didn't.
Yeah.
You decided I'm going to be the guy.
Point.
I'm going to call him. I also think Greg probably did that and was probably like, "Fuck, man, I hate doing this shit. I remember this. This used to be like fun. Not anymore. Like his offenses are high powered, speed, and you just went up against a very potent Kansas State offense. Do you want to do that for? And now, mind you, the Big Ten's different than the Big 12. You're not going to face a high powered offense like that. You're going to face ground and pound, run game, boring football. So. Could he do it still? I think there's a slight chance, but I still think he goes out of the house and hires a DC. And this is also it's out of Greg's coaching tree for the first time in God knows how long. But it goes back to the same thing. He's still sticking to, and Harris Simiak was technically out of his tree as well, unless you want to do a pseudo branch to Fleck to Harris Simiak or whatever. But I think you have to be open to it. But he also has to be open to not just hiring a Jersey guy as well, because that seems to be it's either I've coached with him, someone on my staff has coached with him, or we're going to hire a guy with Jersey ties. Other than that, it seems like every guy basically is from that range.
He did work under Rob Smith, right, at Duke when he was there as a grad assistant / analyst. So there is kind of like a second degree, connection there, but it's not super strong.
Yeah.
But what were you going to say, Alec?
I don't think it'll go now, of course, obviously he has a ton of input on the defense because he's the head coach and he's kind of the architect of it. But I really don't think it'll be they hire another position coach to be the other co-DC and Greg is the play caller and he kind of runs everything, even if he's not entitled as defensive coordinator, because he's publicly talked about how much his job has changed over the years. I just don't see him doing something like that where he goes back to some of his old ways of running the defense. And, obviously some of the best successes of the program, he was the defensive coordinator, but obviously just the nature of college football has changed so much. And he's talked about it publicly too. That's the main thing. Not just that his job has changed in a vacuum, but he's talked about how much his job has changed. I just don't think he would go back to doing that. So yeah, I agree. I think they go elsewhere for the other side of the co-defensive coordinator.
And Rich, you've got a lot of contacts in state. Obviously, he's from Bergen Catholic. He's a Jersey guy. You've talked to a lot of people today about Sparber. I said Sprader before, but it's Zach Sparber. What are you hearing he brings to the table as, just a person, coach? Is he kind of like a rising star? What have you heard about him as a, on the phenom chart, I guess you'd say, because he's still pretty young. He graduated college in 2015, so that puts him right around 30. What have you heard about this guy as a coach?
A lot of just raving about him as a player's coach, basically. He was able to relate to a lot of these guys. You see some of the pictures out there on social media of him, and it seems like all these guys love him, rave about him, just very relatable because of his age. I think that plays a factor as well. And I think that will help on the recruiting trail too. He knows he's one of the dudes, basically. But I like that. We know obviously he's going to have two familiar faces in the defensive room with Eric O'Neill and Daryl Dengoe. But other than that, it just sounds like he's just a very likable guy. And like I said before, in recruiting trails, it sounds like he knows everyone who's everyone. So he could end up being a really damn good recruiter. I don't think he's really gotten a chance to show that yet because, again, the only spot he's ever been where he was on the road was James Madison this past year. And it was a new James Madison staff. So you have to earn that trust on the road. Do I think he'll start out day one and be like, holy shit, he's a recruiting shark? No one does. Do I think he could develop into one, like a Demir Shaw type? I think there's a chance. And you go from there. And like I said before, everyone I've talked to said he's very detail-oriented, has to have everything written down, has it down to a science of how he does it. And that sounds like, honestly, like a mini little version of Greg Schiano right there, where everything has to be to a T. And that's pretty much what you want.
Another guy he coached with at Duke was Matt Guerrieri, who's currently the safeties coach at Ohio State. He was a guy that I listed as a potential candidate kind of piecing some or putting some dots together when the hire hadn't happened after like 6-7 weeks. It's like, oh, maybe they're still in the playoffs. Have you heard about any of the potential co-DC candidates or the DC candidates, or is Guerreri a name to watch here? I know you've got contacts at Ohio State too. What's going? Is there anybody else to keep an eye on right now?
So Guerreri is one of the top targets right now, or top candidates for the open DC spot at Ohio State. Of course, he gets that staying. He's no questions asked. Sure. Will he get that? It's really to be determined. But he's at least, at the very least, going to get a co-DC title, a.k.a. here's your pay bump, and maybe we'll promise you next go-around because you are still pretty young. I think he's 34, 35. Yep. So maybe promise him next go-around, go from there. But the other thing is I was told Guerreri also turned down a certain ACC school's defensive coordinator spot, which you can argue is a little bit on par with Rutgers, I would say. Maybe fans won't like that I said that, but I think you can argue the two schools are on par. I think you can kind of guess where I'm going, considering the schools just played each other over the past 2 years. So, yeah, wink, wink. So he turned down that job, which tells me he's probably going to wait at Ohio State until something, or he's going to try to get the Ohio State DC job. If he doesn't, he just stays there, gets a pay bump. He's happy. He's an Ohio guy. Born and raised in Ohio, Davidson guy. Like he loves the state, and I mean, I get it. State pride, blah, blah, blah. He's one name to keep an eye on. I guess the other couple names that would make sense, and I'm digging deep here. Like if we had the tinfoil hat sponsored by Reynolds wrap, we would pull it out right now. But connections to the co-DC, Zach Sparber, Brian Mitchell, the NC State cornerbacks coach. He was a former DC at East Carolina, also coached at Virginia Tech, West Virginia, NC State. It makes sense, but he wasn't really that good of a DC in what do you call it, at East Carolina. So that's the issue. He's also an Indianapolis guy. So, I mean, Midwest, Big Ten ties, yada, yada, yada. You hear that and you think, oh, every guy from Indiana wants to coach in Big Ten. I don't think that's necessarily true, but everyone on our board says it, so it must be true. Yep. The other guy would be Justin Hamilton, Colts assistant DB's coach. How this works out, I don't really know. I'm assuming he probably just is Chris Hewitt's assistant, unless Chris Hewitt brings in someone new and they just bump him out. Who knows? But a Virginia guy, Virginia Tech alum, coached at Virginia Tech as the safeties coach and was the DC from 2020 to 2021. They weren't great, but they weren't bad. I'd say they were just a good defense, and they were like in the top 55 range in terms of points per game. I didn't really do a deep dive, but ended up getting let go after 2021 by Brent Pry, who also could have been calling the defense because he is a coordinator himself, and went to the Tennessee Titans and now was the Colts DB's coach. But, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, I guess, if it's him. But another young guy, 42, NFL experience as a player, NFL experience as a coach, maybe go that route. I don't really know if there's anyone else out there that has DC experience that can call plays that we haven't touched on. Like, we touched on just about every single one of them.
And a lot of the guys we touched on have recently gotten hired. We can run through the list briefly. So Corey Heatherman, I think you got some interesting nuggets about him, that this was still somebody that Greg was pursuing well after he got that extension with Minnesota. Yeah. Like, we were willing to pay a pretty sizable buyout to get Corey Heatherman, and that kind of went down to the wire until he decided to leave for Miami. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I mean, you kind of just hit everything for the most part. They wanted Heatherman. Heatherman was target number one. There's no question about it. And I don't blame him, because now it kind of was setting up for a perfect little scenario. Now, if Heatherman would have stayed at Rutgers for that one more year, I think we would have no questions asked. And I think Heatherman's your DC currently. He didn't, which I don't blame him either, because you want to be a DC. You got to move up in the world. And I mean, look what he did. He turned that DC 1 year at DC into a DC job at Miami, who's going to pay you a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
And also, we're just passing around coaches of the Greg Schiano coaching tree now at this point. Between Fleck, Schiano, now Cristobal, it's just like, oh, you had him? Oh, I'm going to take him. Oh, you had him? I'm like, what the fuck are we doing?
It's like the tangle of like poison ivy that runs through trees now at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So we had some other guys who were mentioned, and we're not going to say if they had or had not been contacted by Rutgers, but Anthony Campanelli, takes the DC job with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, yeah,
Chris Hewitt's.
we could say it. Like
Okay.
he definitely reached out to Camp. I don't
Yep.
think Camp had any interest, but simple as that.
There's another Big Ten defensive coordinator with Rutgers ties that we've heard Rutgers reached out to. Do you want to touch on who that is?
Yeah, Joe Rossi. I mean, former Rutgers guy, makes a lot of sense in that aspect. In terms of his defense, I don't think it's good. I would have been a good hire at all, to be honest with you.
You know, 1-5 to put that on the field, unbelievable.
Yeah, that not great. But I'm just not sold on Joe Rossi as a Big Ten defensive coordinator. Now, did he do good at Minnesota? Yeah, I think he was okay, but it's Minnesota and it was the Big Ten West. You don't play anyone really, so whatever.
Some other targets that are off the board. Chris Hewitt Sr., he was a guy that we were hot on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of connections that made sense. His son working previously under Greg. His brother's here. Nope, he wants to stay in the NFL, like Richie had reported. He is now the secondary coach for the Indianapolis Colts. Another guy that we thought made a lot of sense, Tim Lukabu. He previously worked under Greg 3 separate times. He was the defensive coordinator at Boston College for 3 years. He's been most recently with the Panthers. He ended up getting another job. I don't remember where he got it.
Jacksonville Jaguars, linebacker coach under Camp.
So he's now an NFL linebackers coach. Again, another guy you'd heard probably wanted to stay in the NFL.
His situation's interesting because like people around Rutgers have told me that they're like, as soon as they heard that Heatherman's out, Rossi's out, they heard Campanelli, of course, and then they also heard Lukabu's name being brought up a bunch of times, and it just never transpired into anything, which is interesting to me. And I know it's hard to probably sell a hire of a guy that just got let go, but his defenses at Boston College were pretty fucking elite for ACC level talent. I mean,
his 2021 season, I believe, was incredible. That defense.
I would have been happy with him personally.
Was that the year that we beat them?
That was 2022.
That was 22. Okay.
I think that would have been a good hire personally.
Yeah. Who else? There was a couple other, I believe, candidates that ended up either sticking in the pros or going elsewhere.
Tyler Santucci went from Georgia Tech to Baltimore Ravens linebacker coach.
We've talked about him, I feel like, endlessly at this point, but Hemphill ended up Hemphill ended up going to Texas A&M.
Yep. So a lot of names that we had discussed as making a lot of sense obviously didn't work out. Whether we were hot on them or not, I think is kind of inconsequential at this point. It did take 2 months, and we're still not fully kind of baked in terms of a coaching staff. Now, functionally, it doesn't really matter, right? There's not coaching on field right now, but it's all about optics. Like when you have like a Penn State, not that Rutgers has that kind of money, but they shot high, they aimed high, and they got their guy. Coaches all around the country, from staffs comparable to Rutgers, are finding their guys pretty quickly. And for it to take 2 months is just kind of a bit of a black eye. And then this is the first move. Now, I'm not saying that there can't be, this off the top ropes, incredible hire that is made here, but just like reading through the tea leaves, it doesn't feel like that's the next move in this game. It feels like we whiffed a few times on our top guys, and now this is kind of like scrambling to figure out something that makes sense. Are you guys getting the same vibes, or is it just me like dooming and glooming, spending way too much time, digging into too many coaches, spending too much time, just need to relax on this? Or do you guys feel the same way?
I mean, I think it's fair. It's a fair feeling to have, especially when like all of us have put so much time into it. Now, not saying that Greg has just been sitting around doing nothing, but yeah, it feels like a little bit anticlimactic. Now, once again, he could turn into a really good defensive coordinator. But yeah, it feels like based on the targets that we had started to come up with, it seemed like they were aiming fairly high. It just seems like aiming a little bit lower than we might have thought. So I think it's a fair thing to think. And then, like I said, obviously it's not like he's doomed forever to be a terrible coordinator. I mean, he could be one of those young rising stars that comes out of nowhere. You never know.
If he's my play caller, I'm very upset. There's just no way you can kind of justify that if that's the play caller. The guy's never called plays. He's only had 1 year of experience technically. Now, did he coach under
leading room? Yeah,
under Foster, under Elko, under who else am I missing? Pry and someone else.
Chesney.
Those are all great coaches. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to throw Brent Pry in the great term, but I'm going to throw that one back.
I don't know if
he was a good DC. at Penn State. He wasn't a good head coach at Virginia Tech. He's an average coach. But anyway, I mean, he's coached under so many good names, but I can't justify a guy that's had 1 year, and he could be damn good down the line. I'm not saying that, but it doesn't make sense to me. You have to go out and hire a DC, and you're not going to promote someone within because you would have done that already. I feel like you have to just find someone. I don't know who, but waiting this long, it does seem kind of crazy. And like you said, Mike, it doesn't matter really at this point because they're just doing workouts and they're not really – it's just workouts, and I don't even know if you're allowed to do film. I forget what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do.
Yeah. Yep.
But it just – other teams have went out and just got a DC within a week. Like, it's just Clemson went out and just stole Penn State's DC. Penn State took 10 days to go find the number one defensive coordinator in the country. And that was their first choice and circled back kind of like the Kirk Shiraka thing a couple years ago. So it's like – and Greg circled back at Corey Heatherman, it sounded like again. So – I just feel like you got to find someone that's notable. Who's it going to be? I don't know because I give up because I've tried every name that's ever been connected to Rutgers or the state of New Jersey, and I can't find one.
Yeah, I think we've gone almost a half hour talking about this co-defensive coordinator hire. We don't think this is the last move on the board, but if this is the last big move on the board, very disappointing. And this is not a shot at Sparber. I hope he comes in and just lights the world on fire. Like, I don't want this to come across as like we think he sucks, because that is not at all what this is. It is just underwhelming given his experience, given kind of the expectations I think we all rightfully had coming off 2 winning seasons. All these defensive players that we brought in, this defense is more talented, I think, than we've had in Greg Schiano's 2.0 era. I know we said that last year too, but this feels even more talented than last. And we have money to offer. Like, there just seems to be too many good factors that should allow us to make a splash higher, and we didn't. So, but again, that doesn't mean it can't happen. But if this is the big move of the coaching offseason, then I'm pretty underwhelmed. One other big football news item: the spring game is announced for, I think, April 26th at 3 p.m. Which is, I think, Rutgers Day weekend. So pretty standard timing for that. But given all the hubbub about certain programs canceling their spring games, it was nice to get that announcement of a solid date for football.
Yeah, and I'm going to tease something real quick. Sounds like TKR might have a little tailgate party sponsored by a certain company. I mean, that's all I can say right now. Certain drinking company. We'll see if it works. It might work. I don't want to tease it too much in case it doesn't, but sounds pretty promising. And it sounds like, Alec, you're covering that game because I'll be a little banged up in the parking lot.
Wait a minute. Hey, I mean, we had a heck of a tailgate last year, the 3 of us standing by Richie's car.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
We met a few of the Discord folks
I forgot
in the
about
parking
that.
lot.
Yeah. So, but if this ends up working out, I'm just saying, it might get a little crazy.
That'd be sick. Love to hear it.
Oh boy.
All right, so that's all we got football wise. Rich, if you got to drop, you got to drop. But we'll talk a little bit of hoops here. Big time bummer of a loss on Saturday. Rutgers lost 66-63 in a game that never really felt like a one-score game, even though that's what the result ended up being. Rutgers falls to Michigan to go to, I think, 11-11 on the season. Right, Alec?
Yeah, I think so.
In just another disappointing result in a season of seemingly there's these occasional oasis games where Rutgers wakes up and gets a big win, but for the most part, been pretty disappointing. What was your main takeaway from Saturday's loss with Rutgers, good or bad?
Yeah, it was the defense played well enough to win. And the most frustrating part was when you get a team that doesn't have their best and you still just don't have enough. That's kind of the summary of what happened on Saturday. Ace Bailey struggled. He could not replicate his inhumane, that's not the right word.
Inhuman.
Alien-like, I don't know. He was absolutely insane the last few games. He couldn't recreate that, unfortunately, on Saturday. He struggled from the floor. Michigan made the decision that really didn't make sense why Northwestern didn't do this, of doubling him basically every time he got the ball and saying, Ace Bailey's not going to beat us. We'll make everyone else on Rutgers beat us. And it worked. He struggled. He went 0 of 6 from the floor. Jermichael Davis and Tyson Acuff really stepped up when he was struggling, but it was not enough. Jermichael Davis actually had a career game, 20 points. He's really looked a lot better of late, honestly. It feels like he's a lot more under control at times. He'll still have the occasional drive to the basket where he's going up into like a 6'10" guy and gets blocked or whatever. But for the most part, he looks a lot more in control. He's taking an increased role in stride because they didn't have Jeremiah Williams for a lot of the game. I believe he was sick again and played a little bit in the first half, but then couldn't go in the second half. So he's really taken that change in role kind of in stride. I've been very impressed with him. Unfortunately, it hasn't come with the boost from everyone else. It was particularly a rough shooting day. It seemed like the shot selection wasn't the best either, given that Ace Bailey was limited and getting doubled all the time, and everyone else had to try to pick up the slack. Rutgers shot 10 for 36 from 3 on the game, 3 for 15 in the first half, 7 of 21 in the second half. 21 of their 31 shots in the second half came from 3, and they made 7 of them. They went 4 of 10 from inside the arc. That's actually kind of shocking in my opinion, honestly. But yeah, it was kind of just a rough shooting game. I mean, Ace Bailey, 3 of 15 from the floor, 0 of 7 from 3. He did have that monster poster dunk that was really impressive. Acuff and Davis, I thought, played pretty well. That was pretty much most of the positives. The defense played pretty well. Like I said, they didn't get Michigan on their best day. Danny Wolf was pretty solid. Vlad Golden was pretty solid, especially later on in that game. But, Michigan kind of struggled, too, from the floor. I mean, the only guys to make more than 2 field goals in the game, Trey Donaldson, Vlad Golden, and Danny Wolf, and they were able to get the win. So, again, it was pretty frustrating that, you get a team that doesn't have its best, and you still can't come away with the win. Michigan ended up realizing in the second half, like, wait, we can just go inside and really do a lot of damage there as well.
I can't believe they didn't decide that to start the game with 2 7-footers in their starting lineup and Rutgers without its starting big man, but that's another conversation for another day.
Exactly. It's going to be really tough against Illinois. Probably, I would say the most talented team in the Big Ten. I think Michigan State obviously has a chance for that title as well, but I think Illinois is the most talented team in the Big Ten. It doesn't seem like Dylan Harper's going to be back, not really based on any intel or anything, but just based on he's still in the boot as of Saturday. Peichel said it was a high ankle sprain, and we know that those can take a really long time. So it's going to be really tough. I mean, going up against guys like Kasparis Giacosonis, guys like Will Riley, who can really go off at any moment, and then Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, a guy that kind of came into the starting lineup, kind of like a Jermichael Davis-esque, a really good athlete, a lot of really speedy guy. So this Illinois team just has a ton of talent, and it's going to be a tough matchup.
Yeah, it's not a great matchup for Rutgers, not like many matchups are the rest of the season, but Illinois is a very talented team and will be just as big, if not a bigger challenge than Michigan was this past weekend. And it's becoming more and more like if there was to be a run this season, it has to take place in Indianapolis, a la NC State last year, because outside of winning every game the rest of the season, in the regular season, Rutgers is not making the NCAA tournament. They could squeak into one of these postseason tournaments, going 16-14 or 15-15, but even that you have to win 4 or 5 quad 1 wins the rest of the season, which is certainly on its own not easy. So,
and then Matt Hackman, as he does every year, released his Big Ten tournament seeding probabilities that came out today. Actually, let me see if I can pull this up on the computer. And Rutgers, I believe, has a better chance in terms of the simulations that he ran of missing the Big Ten tournament than making it. So,
wow.
Or actually, no, that's not true. The percentages, I don't know. I'm not a math guy, but I'll let the graph speak for itself. So Rutgers has if you're lining it up here, 27% chance of missing the tournament. So they have a better chance of missing it than any particular seed, but obviously they still have a good chance to make it. So I messed that one up, but either way, it's not looking great. When the average seed is 13.8, so basically a 14 seed, you are the second team in, which is not a good thing. The double bye is still in play. 5 scenarios have Rutgers in a double bye. I don't know what scenarios those are. I'm sure all of them involve winning out, but it's not looking great.
Yeah, no, it's been a rough season for a lot of reasons, but I don't have a whole lot more to say. You kind of hit on all the things that I was hoping to discuss basketball wise. Chance to turn things around on Wednesday, but I think we're all at the point where it's we talked about the season in a lot of ways. We talked about the stages of grief. We talked about where somebody would be if this team was brought into the hospital, whether it be critical condition. We talked about getting red last rights. This just feels like we've been sitting Shiva for this basketball team for a few weeks now, where it's just kind of like, I know we had the big win at Northwestern, and that kind of sucked me back in a bit, but it just feels like, we're we're doing CPR on a dead body, just to not announce the time of death. And I hate to be that morbid about the team, and we've all had sky high expectations, but I just don't know of another way to kind of talk about it at this point. Where just I don't know. I'm just so disappointed and just so down that it's hard to even get excited to talk about basketball anymore. A big update for wrestling. Bo Bassett was on campus a few weeks ago. He is the top wrestler in the country, arguably. He is set to decide tomorrow. Richie, if he was here, would tell you. But Rutgers made his final 7. It does not sound like Rutgers will be the destination for Bo Bassett.
Yeah, he came out with his final 4 actually today on Flow Wrestling. Rutgers was not in it. Let me see if I can find what the final 4 was. But yeah, Rutgers did not make his final 4. I thought they were in a pretty good spot because having the last visit is usually a good sign. I heard that it seemed like they were in a pretty good spot, but it does not appear that he will be going to Rutgers. Trying to see if I can find that. All right, so I believe it's Oklahoma State. Here it is. Oklahoma State, Iowa, Penn State, and Virginia Tech are his final 4. So Rutgers not among those. So Rutgers will not be landing Bo Bassett.
Pat Minio, who runs one of the most active college and high school wrestling accounts on Twitter, talked about how this is a record-setting NIL type situation. So use that information as you will in terms of predicting where he will end up. But that'll be announced tomorrow, and it will not be Rutgers. But Rutgers continues to be in on these big recruitments. For the Dalton Schultzes, for the AJ Ferraris, for a lot of these top guys. They've just been bridesmaid too often. They've landed a lot of great recruits, but they have consistently not landed these elite recruits, these top 10 level guys. They've gotten a lot of the top 25 to 50, but they have not gotten these top 10 types. Wanted to remind everyone out there, we are running a giveaway for our 400th episode extravaganza, if you want to call it. We're giving away 2 prize packages. To be eligible for those prize packages, you can get in on it one of 2 ways. The first way will get you 2 entries. You leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Mention 400 in your review somewhere, and we will give you 2 entries. Way to get 1 entry is to go below in this YouTube video and put a comment out there about something referencing 400. It doesn't need to necessarily be talking about the episode. Just as long as it's got 400 in the comment, that'll get you 1 entry as well. And we will do the drawing at the end of February to get you guys those prizes and say thank you. One thing I wanted to shout out before we sign off, there's not a lot of Rutgers content out there on the podcast or the YouTube scene, at least not a lot of regular content. One that is a little more obscure, and I want to get him some more follows, is the Scarlet Rogue. Puts out a lot of good content. He's got a lot of character. He's a very long-time Rutgers fan, and I know he's commented on a few of our videos, and I just want to give him a shout out. I want to get him some more follows. He didn't ask me to do this, but if you go to YouTube and just type in Scarlet Rogue, it should be one of the top comments. Let me get you his exact channel because I think he does a really good job. He's a very knowledgeable Rutgers fan. He's been following Rutgers forever. It's Scarlet-Rogue Sports. So I'll put it in the comments as well. But just wanted to boost up another Rutgers content creator. Anything
Very
you
nice
wanted
of
to
you.
hit on before we head out of here, Alec?
Yeah, so wrestling also had a tough weekend. They lost to Minnesota. They had a chance to stack on some of the momentum that they got with the win over Illinois, and unfortunately couldn't do it. Minnesota just brought a ton to the table, and Rutgers got a few wins, but ultimately, I forget the final score. I think it was like 20-something to 9 that Rutgers lost. Not exactly Rutgers related. This weekend is the Metro Classic at Franklin High School. Um, there's a ton of talent in New Jersey and also from the entire country coming to Franklin. I'll have a preview with all the teams and players to look out for tomorrow morning. Depending on when you're watching this, it might already be out. If you're watching this on Tuesday, it might already be out. Just to go off some of the talent that's coming in. Aiden Durkak and Colonia, they'll be playing. They will be in their first game. They will be playing against a familiar name, Darius Adams and La Lumiere. They have a ton of talent as well. Darius Adams returning to New Jersey. He plays for La Lumiere out in Indiana. Other guys to look out for, Jalen Harrelson, signee to Notre Dame. And La Lumiere, a very good team as well. Montverde is coming back for the second year in a row. They don't have the same legendary starting five that they had last year, but there's still a lot of talent. Guys like CJ Ingram, Trent Sisley, Dante Allen, Caden Allen, a 5-star in 2026. Alabama's commit London Jemison and St. Thomas More. If you want to see a social media star, Jake West for Penn Charter has 1.5 million followers on TikTok, so you might have heard of him. He's going to Northwestern. Let's see, looking at some of these other guys. Someone that's might be familiar to Rutgers fans, Kelvin Odie and Trip McLean in SoCal Academy. They'll be playing as well. A ton of New Jersey schools as well. Obviously, I think there's 25 total schools. I don't remember how many are from New Jersey, but College Achieve, they got guys like Nas Hart, Eric Hillsman. Big name for Blair Academy, Darren Rippey Jr. A lot of local offers as well. Just a ton of talent. Jaden Hodge and St. Rose. One of the public schools that's kind of taken the state by storm, Plainfield. Najee Hines, since coming over from a school in North Carolina, he's kind of put up video game numbers close to 2020 since starting play for Plainfield. So if you want to check it out, it's this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at Franklin High School. And definitely check out the preview that I will have either tomorrow morning or it's already out now when you're reading this, because I spent a lot of time on it, so please read it. A lot of these schools are not easy to find when it comes to stats, which is also a PSA. Please input your stats. It makes our job a lot easier. But anyways, that's beside the point. It should be a really exciting weekend of high school basketball.
Love to hear it. Another great showcase for high school hoops in the state of New Jersey. But I hope we covered everything you were hoping to hear today. I know that there was a junior day this past weekend. We'll touch on some responses from that on the next episode. Richie unfortunately had to jump off a little bit early today, but hopefully we get some more clarity on the football coaching staff, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. I know we don't sound overly negative because I am pretty high on this football team's upcoming season. Just it seems like a very peculiar, circuitous way to fill out the staff if this is the final move. But for me, Alec, and Richie, this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast, signing off.